All right, welcome to the latest edition of the Unfiltered podcast. I'm your host, Earnest EJ Christian, coming to you just after Labor Day, September 3rd, 2024. As promised, I told you guys last week that starting after Labor Day, we'll be going weekly on this thing. Like I said, this show is probably going to be mostly an audio focused show, shorter shows. Like this is what I call the B side of Earnest Speaker podcast. This is what I call also the the topics here will be more time sensitive stuff, long form podcast, as it has been for since its inception, but more so focused now. And obviously you're probably wondering, well, like normally these shows are very the quality is great because like me on the road or whatever maybe, and I got that. Well, some episodes like this one, for example, will be in studio, but it won't be with camera. It'll be just me in doing it through my soundboard and coming in and put out my my thoughts of the day. And that's kind of the goal of the podcast anyway. I want to be able to have a lane. People will ask me, well, why don't you just put the show in one spot? Well, the reason why I never did that, and I did for a little while, and it's never worked for me and my ADHD self anyway, is that I hate clutter, number one. I hate clutter. And, there's a lot of stuff. Like the majority of the stuff on Earnest podcast have legs. Like, even if it's a week or two, has legs. And it's long form. And I don't want those episodes to get cluttered up with stuff that really aren't as open-ended in that way. I wanted to put a show or episodes where it's time sensitive, it's short, it's to the point, and we go. And I say that as I'm taking too much time talking here about all this stuff, but that's the goal here. We're going to hit on topics for the day, daily topics, and like I said, I want to keep it closer to like a more intimate, radio-friendly. When I say radio, I mean like more so like, look, there might be some episodes or two here and there that I might do video, depending how I feel. But for the most part, I'm going to keep this more, this feed is a audio-only feed moving forward, barring any other different things. But anyway, so let's talk just a couple things here I want to talk about on my head. What am I talking about? Like I said, it's been a long weekend. Good weekend, but long weekend. A lot of rain too. I just actually ate a nice little breakfast, healthy breakfast. Went for like a mile and a half, 1.6 mile walk outside here. I was tempted to go over 2 miles, but it's really hot outside now. Now that the rain's going away, it's hot outside. So I'm like, fuck. Let me just get inside the house and just relax and do this. And I said, just record the podcast now while I can. So, and plus, I want to take up the stress right now of football. Right now, college football sucks for me. Florida State Seminoles, I'm a fan of that school. First of all, I didn't watch the game last night. And you want to know why? So, I don't necessarily have. Okay, so I use my my cousin's login for certain stations, like for ESPN and other things of that nature. Well, he has DirecTV, and if you haven't heard, DirecTV and Disney/Hulu, whatever, are right now currently in a dispute right now, and as a result, ESPN, which is part of Disney, of course, and DirecTV, have all the material as of, was it Sunday or Monday, whatever it was. Regardless, yesterday, everything's blacked out. It was off the playlist. So I couldn't watch the game last night. Which, the way I see that, how things played out last night, my God, my Lord Jesus Christ was looking out for me. Because what in the hell was that last night? Florida State Seminoles lose. What was the final score? 28-13? Wasn't even close. That's the funny thing, too, also. The game wasn't even close. Like, I'm watching the highlights, I'm like, this is the same school won 13-0 last year? Like, and granted, it looks silly now in hindsight, like, and obviously, a lot of these kids aren't there anymore, so we get all that. But, this is the same school won 13-0 last year? And then we were simping to get in the college playoff, and again, once again, I understand why they didn't get in, and I don't have to agree with it. And obviously, they lost a lot of players last year. But this kind of drop-off? This drop-off? Look, the season's over, obviously. They're not making it into the college playoff, barring them finding some sort of light between now and November. But from what you've seen last week against Georgia Tech, from what you saw last night against Boston College, do you see any sort of like opportunity for Florida State to get better? Like, really, let's be real here. I don't see it. So, in my mind, this season's already over. This season's cooked. And a lot of talk about Mike Norvell, head coach. Everybody's talking about, oh, well, they should fire him. He should be on the hot seat. What are y'all talking about? Look, he gets most of the blame for what's happening, and he's not got the hook for this one. But to suggest 2 games in, 0-2, and I get it, not a good look, but 0-2, that the Florida State Seminoles should consider firing Mike Norvell just like that, to me, is absolutely ludicrous. Like, what are y'all talking about? Like, you guys do understand this guy just went 13-0 last year. You do understand that, right? I mean, we don't like when. And I think this is one of the things I can't stand about, social media, and you read all these things every day on social media. And I try not to get too emotionally, unbalanced and stuff, because people are going to have takes. Some are serious, some are not, and we get all that. But to suggest that this dude, Mike Norvell, who's literally turned the program around after a program that there were multiple years where they did not make a fucking bowl game. This guy turns it around, and this team's now all of a sudden, up until this year anyway, up until, a national title contender. And now we're ready to, like, okay, do away with him? Y'all folks need to slow down, bro. Y'all folks need to slow down. Seriously. Like, yes, we can be mad about the performance of the team and what he's done, and we get all that. I'm with you on that. I don't disagree. I don't. But to sit here and suggest that Mike Norvell should be fired already, like, what are we doing? Like, what are we really doing here? Like, y'all need to calm down. And look, it's probably going to be a bad year. I don't know. 2 games in, it looks bad. It looks really bad. The offense looks absolutely garbage. So I can't. The things I can't tell you how I feel going forward. So like, what are the feelings of this team? Like, do I feel like this team can win? Can still make a bowl game? That's the first question. Can this team win a bowl game? Get to a bowl game? Like, I'm gonna still say yes. I mean, it's Florida State, right? Yeah, we talk about while you're coming to the year that Florida was the Gators were the probably gonna be the worst team of the major schools in the state of Florida. They had a 4.5 win total, and I had the under because of the schedule and because we just didn't think they'll be that good this year. And obviously they look putrid against Miami. The other day, but we'll get that in a second. Miami, I had a lot about Miami in a second, but at the same time, it's like, wow. Like, could we find 6 wins on the schedule for this team school? I'm gonna still say yes, just because. I mean, they can't get any worse, right? By the way, the quarterback, DJ Ungulale, 2 games in. I'm willing to give another week, maybe even 2. But at this point, he has looked so bad that if I'm Florida State at this point now, if I'm Mike Norvell, I am pulling the hook if I have to soon. And whoever the backup is, I don't know the entire roster like that. Give him a shot. If things go off the rails after next week, if you don't see any improvement or any sort of like light, pull the trigger and bring the backup in and see what you got. Because clearly, DJ Ungulale through 2 games is not what we asked for. So disappointing start, And thank you God for looking out for me last night by not having the game available on my TV screen. I even tried to find the game, illegally on a stream somewhere, and I couldn't get that up either. But again, thank God looking out. Now I'm just hoping that they get this ESPN deal fixed before week 1 in the NFL. You got Monday football, next week. That's going to be a problem. Jets and Niners in week 1, I got to watch that. I got to watch that. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. As for the rest of week 1 takeaways, and we're going to do obviously, in addition to this podcast, the main show, Earnest EJ Podcast, you can subscribe to any podcast catcher on any feed, any platform. We're going to be covering that actually today. Our student game report. My man Kyle Nash will be on the show. We're going to run through a little bit of some of the storylines in college football right now, currently. But my takeaways here so far is as follows. Biggest takeaway for me is Miami, and not just how good they looked, but how good Cam Ward, the quarterback, looks. He might be the one game sample, obviously. We wouldn't get over ahead of ourselves here, but might be the shit. This guy might be the possible Heisman candidate, maybe a leader. Who knows? I was telling somebody the other day, I was watching the game, and I was telling somebody that this dude reminds me actually of, and you guys are going to laugh at me and say this, but hear me out. I'm watching Cam Ward play, at the Swamp, and this dude reminds me of Tony Romo. He was like, Tony Romo, what the fuck are you talking about? Nah, let me hear me out. You see the sidearm throws, you see the way his delivery of the ball? I mean, he's out of the pocket and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that reminds me of Tony Romo. Reminds me of black Tony Romo. Kid's good, man. And the thing about him is that even for a guy who's mobile, he still surveys the field. I'm watching him play. I'm watching him go to the left hand side. When he's scrambling, he's still looking at surveying the field. A lot of mobile quarterbacks struggle with that. They do one read and they don't see the one read. They off to the races. This dude surveys the field. He seems like he has control of the line of scrimmage, and that's a good sign. This might be Miami's best quarterback. Certainly the best one I've seen performance-wise since, Ken Dorsey? Gino Torretta? I don't know. It's pretty good. But again, it's a one-game sample. Let's see how it plays out. And obviously, I'm a Seminoles fan, so I'm getting all, everybody's texting me, all my Florida Gators and Miami Hurricane friends and family texting me and all that, and they're all talking, all sorts of garbage, and I'm like, okay, whatever, right? So it is what it is with that, but that's what one takeaway. The other takeaway, obviously the usuals, the Georgias and who else? The Ole Miss dominated, Alabama dominated, and again they all played. Other than Georgia played schools, they're supposed to be dominated. But I think we I think we have an idea in a 12-game, in the world of 12-game playoff. We have a pretty good idea already off the shoot who's getting in. I mean, most people are, were probably felt that way even before the season started. But one game in, I think we have a good idea who are the haves and have-nots of the college football world. Ole Miss, Alabama, obviously, Georgia, and all those schools and whatnot. And Ohio State, who did struggle early, but they dominated, rest of the way. That much is true. Obviously, we get to the meat potatoes of the schedule as we move forward. And again, this is the cool thing about having a 12 playoff is parity. And now, not every game actually is not as under a microscope as it used to be. The margin of error, again, as I said before, the margin of error now is much wider. Even the Florida State Seminoles, who, as bad as they looked the first 2 weeks, and I don't think it's going to happen based on what I've seen the first 2 weeks, but if they turn things around, win the ACC, they still get in the playoff. So that's the cool thing. So it's never really over yet until it's over. You know what I'm saying? But that's just that. Brian Kelly, LSU, getting beaten, upset by USC. Folks are kind of mad about Brian Kelly's reaction to the loss. I had no problem with it. He held someone accountable. He may not like the way he said the things he said, but he held someone accountable. I mean, it's clear he's not really good at week one college football opening games, but to be fair, he opens up against competitive teams every year. So, is Brian Kelly in the hot seat? I don't know. Hot seats also too in college football. Lincoln Riley. I would say Lincoln Riley at one point, but he won the game against LSU, so he's fine now for the time being. Is Brian Kelly on the summer warm seat now? I doubt that, but something to look at. The dude Billy Napier in Florida, that dude's on a hot seat probably as well. So I mean that it makes it really hot is that one. That seat is definitely warm. I actually say more than warm at this point. But other than that, it was relatively, other than Florida State against fucking things up again for the second week in a row, it was relatively a chalk weekend. And that's all, at the same time, you can really look at. So, anyway. So we'll see week 2 in college football. Move forward. All right. Let's talk about LeBron James real quick. LeBron James, I guess yesterday, put out his Mount Rushmore list of quarterbacks. Football starting this week, and obviously everybody's getting to the spirit. I'm excited about it too, especially. LeBron James' Mount Rushmore list is as follows. Obviously, Mount Rushmore is 4. So he has number 1, Tom Brady. Number 2, Pat Mahomes. Number 3, Joe Montana. And then he said number 4, he initially had, what was it? He had John Elway first initially. Then he said, no, wait. I don't know if I can do that. Then he put in Peyton Manning as his top 4. Let me just say this for the record, and you guys know this. I've been talking about this on various platforms for the last year or so, especially in the wake of Pat Mahomes just recently getting a third ring, and Pat Mahomes doing the damn thing he's been doing for the last 6 years as starting quarterback, entering year 7 starting quarterback. Pat Mahomes is right in that conversation. His top 3 is correct. Whatever order you want to put it in, you want to put Mahomes number 1. I still think Brady number 1 for the time being because of longevity and the 7 rings. But as I always said, Pat Mahomes does not need 7 rings for me to consider him the GOAT. So his top 3 is fine. Brady, Mahomes, Montana. Montana number 2 is fine. I don't care. That 4 spot's always been hard for me to figure out though, because I agree with LeBron. Elway and Peyton Manning would be the next person in that list. I would have at one point put Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers by talent definitely is in the conversation. But Aaron Rodgers has not. He's won a title in 14 years. I mean, it's almost scary to think that Aaron Rodgers has gone this long without winning another ring. And granted, I'm not sitting there saying that he deserves to be in the conversation because talent alone puts him in the conversation. But there's been so many playoff failures, especially in recent years, that does he really get that much of a pass on that? Maybe. I don't know. I'm also a guy that has Dan Marino top 5 even regardless, because even without the rings, but Dan Marino's had some really, really, let's just say, mid teams, really mid rosters to work with. And football's complicated too, because basketball's more definitive because basketball, as a player, you control a lot on both sides of the ball, whereas in football you only control one side of the ball. So it's not as definitive in football. There's a little more wiggle room in football. People can say, well, what about the rings? Well, Terry Bradshaw has 4 rings, and Terry Bradshaw, in my opinion, is not even the top 10 quarterback in the league in NFL history. So let's cut that noise. You know what I'm saying? So LeBron's list, I don't necessarily. I love the top 3. Peyton Manning. The case to Peyton Manning number 4 is that in terms of him as the quarterback, as doing the job itself, he might be the greatest quarterback of all time in terms of doing the job, in terms of the toolbox, and him being able to call plays on a whim, and his regular season wise, he's one of the most dominant quarterbacks in the history of the game. But he has a lot of playoff failures. His 2 Super Bowl runs, actually, in fact, are not very not good. If you look at the stats in his 2006 run and his 2014 or 2015 run, or 14, whatever it was, not great, not great at all. His stats were not great. Numbers were very mid for a guy in those playoff runs. John Elway has a case, in my opinion, because if John Elway, while he won 2 on his back end of his career, he went to 3 early in his career with some teams that had no business being in the conversation, much less in the Super Bowls. He's gone to 5. He's gone to 5. And the teams lost to in early in his career. He lost to, a 86 Giants, who was one of the 20 best teams in the history of football. He lost to the 88 Redskins, now Commanders, but old Redskins, who was also a pretty good team as well, too. I mean, that was probably the only one I would say he probably should have won that one because, that Doug Williams was quarterback. But we didn't here and there. And then right next year, he loses to the Niners in the Super Bowl. And that Niners team in 89, 2 years later, rather, in 89 Super Bowl, where he lost to the Niners. And many believe it's a top 3 to 5 best singular team in history of the NFL. So, Elway being to the Super Bowl so many times early in his career actually helps his case. Peyton Manning, though, he has the numbers, granted different eras, but has numbers. So, the Elway Peyton Manning argument is legit on LeBron's case. I give him a pass on that because that's tough. It depends on what you, It depends on what you prioritize as a priority as to put the fourth guy on that list. So it's tough. Like, for me, if I were to do the list, obviously the three guys are easy. Mahomes, Brady, Montana, whatever you want to put it in. The fourth guy, honestly, God, it's tough. Because now you bring up stats against results. Oh man, oh my God. I guess Peyton. I guess Peyton Manning would be there. The numbers, the stats. Could be Brady, and even Elway, when he won his 2 rings on the back end, he wasn't no better than Peyton. He was pretty good, but he was no better than Peyton. I'll get to Peyton Manning just because of the the numbers and the MVPs and the stats and all that. But that's neck and neck. To be honest with you. But I've always said Aaron Rodgers was better than both guys anyway, physically. So if I'll say this much: if the Jets and Aaron Rodgers win the Super Bowl this year, both of those guys are out. Aaron's going in number 4. Put it that way. All right. One last thing we got out of here. Again, thank you guys for subscribing. Of course. Once on the presidential election, I always say that every 4 years, the lead up to the election in November, we have all the caucuses, the debates, and all that stuff, and you have the DNC, RNC, and all that. And you have polling going from last year all the way through, and the ebbs and flows of the presidential election and all that good stuff. But now is where the stuff begins. Now is where the election truly begins. I always say after Labor Day is where, I always consider Labor Day the 7th inning stretch. Okay, now we are 2 months away from the election. Okay. The first debate's next week, Wednesday, which I'm hoping to watch because I think I have a podcast scheduled that night though. I believe that the polling you've seen, because the polling you've seen since Joe Biden left the race and Kamala Harris has, here you go, I said it correctly, here you go. And I've been saying correctly a lot more often. Even when I say Kamala, I've corrected myself pretty quickly. So shout out to my friends and family who always give me shit for that. But the one thing I will say is that the polling you've seen since in the last 5 weeks since Kamala has entered the race, she's obviously surging. She's leading all the polls, most of the polls rather. Is that don't get married to those polls either. Like, I love polls. I love reading polls. You guys know on social media I love retweeting and requoting polls and just having conversations about that. They are data points. They are not the be-all, end-all, okay? There are a lot of margin of error in those polls, too, also. And some polls also skew left, some polls also skew right. So it depends on the polls you look at. Don't get married to the polls. Don't. Here's what I'll say, though. If you ask me right now, my personal opinion, this is all based on feeling, not based on what I've seen. I'm using the data, for example, but I'm also using feelings based on the data as well, too. Pay attention mostly right now to the battleground states. Forget the fact that Kamala's up. I think Nate Silver had her up a little over 3 points, 3.2 up on Trump. Most polls have her up, around the same number. Most polls, not saying all, most polls. But you have to pay attention to the battleground states, especially the ones in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, and Wisconsin. Because that's the election right there. Because if Kamala wins those 3 states, she wins the election. Period. Discussion. She wins those 3 and everything else holds, as it probably should be. She wins the election. But, however, I think because those polls are still well within the margin of error, Kamala's up by 1 point in Pennsylvania. There's some polling up there. Kamala's up a little bit bigger in Michigan, but not far out of the margin of error. Kamala's still in margin of error up in Wisconsin. I would still give Trump a slight edge. And here's why. People are going to say, well, what the fuck are you talking about? Why Trump? Here's why. Because the fact that it's still in margin of error, I think Kamala Harris, here's the thing. Donald Trump is already defined. He's already defined. We know who he is. The people who are supporting him are lock, stock, and barrel. There isn't much wiggle room with Donald Trump. I don't think he can gain much more support, any more support. He may gain a little bit here and there on the fringes, but not much more. The folks who are with Trump have already been with him and are going to stay with him. He's not going to gain much more traction. Donald Trump's ceiling pretty much is 45 to 46%. He might be looking at 47% if he can string in some more independent votes. But the data and you're using using past behavior of 2016 and 2020, he's not getting past no higher than 47 points, 47% of the electorate. He's just too polarizing. That's the bottom line. But the battleground states, he's still in range, and Kamala Harris still is not defined yet. We saw the first interview last week. I gave her a C. I reviewed her on this very podcast. I gave her a C on that in the interview. I think that there's still the debates. That she needs debates. She needs debate. She needs to be able to counter Trump and be able to also, messaging in terms of like what is she going to do? What is her plans? What is she planning to do as President of the United States? And if she can do that, she'll be fine. The problem is there's still a risk for Kamala to lose support, and there's also a lot of things around her in the fringes. The Gaza issue being one thing. There's also a lot of Democrats or liberals who don't like her because she's too corporate. There's also some Democrats who think she's a little bit too, by picking Tim Walz, that she's too, fringe on the socialism thing, which I don't necessarily agree with, but that's here or there. The reality is that's just out there. That rhetoric's out there. So there's still more. Kamala, this election is pretty much based on Kamala Harris at this point now. She can sink in the polls or she can rise. Donald Trump is ready. He's getting to 45 to 47% of the electorate. That's going to happen. Okay. If Kamala is able to do what Joe Biden did 4 years ago, and somehow coalesce all the support on the fringes in the party, even some of the independents who are not happy with the Democratic Party, or even some of some of these soft-leaning Republicans who don't like Donald Trump, that will like him out of the paint and rather support her, support her until he's gone. She has more to gain and also more to lose than Donald Trump. Donald Trump is already baked in. His numbers are already baked in. I don't see Donald Trump's numbers getting any better going forward. Okay, maybe very, very slightly. Maybe another 1%, that's about it. And that's why I think Kamala, everything is based on Kamala at this point now. And we don't know. It's very volatile and unstable. We don't know exactly. So that's why I think Trump still has a slight edge because of that, because you know what you're getting with that one. With Kamala, we don't know yet. And I think after the first debate, we'll have a better idea where this thing stands. Next week's debate is going to be huge. This next week's debate could decide the election, because at that point, you'll have. I don't think the debates, even if they do debate in the future, in October or late September rather, I don't think you'll get as much eyeballs for those other debates as it would with the first one. So next week, Wednesday, the entire election could be based on this debate, and specifically with how Kamala Harris comes and presents herself. That's the big question and the big topic there for me. So anyway, this one a little bit longer than usual. Not used to that. These podcasts will be a lot shorter, going forward. But I had a lot to talk about here. But anyway, I am on Twitter or /X at EJ Christian 7. The Unfiltered podcast, Earnest being Unfiltered. Again, this is the B side of Earnest podcast. Still subscribe both podcasts. My YouTube page, of course, at youtube.com/Earnest Christian. All my materials there, all my podcasts, all the stuff I do on the Huddle Up podcast every Tuesday, which this week, no show this week. We're moving tomorrow night with the Simulcast with Student Game Podcast. I'm recording 2 podcasts tonight, actually, with Kyle Nash, Student Game Report this afternoon. And then later on tonight, we'll do our week 1 picks with Zach Degenerate for the NFL. So, till then, till next one, till tomorrow, we will talk soon. Love you guys, and take care, stay up, and see ya.